Well, the Baltimore Ravens destroy the Bengals, but the story of the night is Joe Burrow, and that throwing hand does not look good. We will dive into all things AFC North, as well as a lot of people had takes on the internet on Carissa Thompson and what she said to the Pardon My Take guys, as well as Dan Campbell. Why no NFL coach, I don't care how much a college job pays, if it's your alma mater, ever leaves if things are going well. And we'll dive into some other things around the NFL, as well as the bold take of the week, which I'm hot. I just nailed the last one, so we'll see if I can get the other this week again. But before we dive into everything, obviously, if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe. We need you to subscribe. If you're subscribed, tell your friends to subscribe. Share the channel. Share the videos with all your friends. Appreciate it. If you listen to the audio version, you know what to do. Apple, Spotify, we have you covered, as well as thevolume.com, thevolume.com. We got merch. We got hats. Before we dive into Joe Burrow and the night that was Al Michaels and Amazon, let's tell you about a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine. Someone asked, John, is Gametime sending you to Vegas this weekend for the F1 race? I said, well, I didn't even really know what was going on, but if I wanted to go, hell yeah, they would have. I'm playing golf on Saturday. I'm watching college football. Not the biggest racing guy, but if you want to go to the racing event, do you want to go to any event? Download the Gametime app right now on your smartphone. Gametime, download that bad boy. Buy a pair of tickets. You name the event, they got you covered. Concerts, comedy shows as well. And when you check out your first pair of tickets, use a little promo code, John, John, John. That's my name. Very, very easy to use, John, and get $20 off. Inflationary times, anytime that you can save a couple dollars, I don't even need a thank you. Just hammer that promo code. Any event you want to go to, college, pro, concerts, comedy shows, download the Gametime app, the official ticketing app of this podcast, and use that promo code John for $20 off. Okay, the story of the night, I'm recording this. I don't even know if the game is officially ended yet, but is obviously the health of Joe Burrow. And the one thing in the NFL, when you have a quarterback of Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, you name it, an elite Lamar Jackson, and they go down, I'm sorry, your season is over. Now, depending on the time of year and what your record is, you might still be able to make the playoffs, but you have no chance to do anything. Like, that's clear. I don't need to explain that to anyone listening. We've all watched football long enough. I think the question mark is in situations like this, and the sad part is early in the season, it was hard to watch Joe Burrow. And I was texting with some buddies, like, when Joe Burrow was on, like the version we saw a couple weeks ago against the 49ers, you could argue that's like the best player in the league. He's every bit as good as Patrick Mahomes when he's playing like that, especially given the weaponry that he has currently and that Patrick doesn't, right? Now, I'm not saying he's necessarily a better player, but I don't think there's a big difference when he's on. Now, clearly this year from that, and then the last couple weeks, whatever he's been dealing with his hand. And listen, I didn't have any money on the game tonight, but if I had bet, I 100% would have put it on the Bengals +4. Because while it's a big game for the Ravens, they still have a lot of room for error. They have they had 2 less losses, even though they blew last week. This is a game that the Bengals, if they want to make the playoffs, have to win. I know it's on the road. I know it's a short week. I don't care. A lot like the Bills last week, it's very, very difficult to go 5-5 in the conference and have a chance to make a run. And let's face it, they were already behind the 8 ball the way they started. So something shady happened in the injury report. And we got to know, like, we're all in bed with these gambling partners and no one more than the NFL. You can't have a guy walk into the stadium with something on his hand. We knew about the finger, right? He'd been battling the finger the last couple of weeks, but clearly this was something different. And I don't give a shit what they say after the game. And I'm sure they're going to try to, kind of downplay it. That is unacceptable. And one thing the NFL is pretty good about is not allowing that to happen. It didn't bother me a couple weeks ago when it happened with the Falcons and like Bijan Robinson got sick the night before. It's like, whatever, that happens. But in this situation, when a guy shows up to the game with something happen, when clearly you've practiced all week and he's not on the injury report, that is not allowed. I don't blame Joe Burrow. That's on the team. And if the league digs deep and finds something weird or nefarious, you fucking hammer him, because that is not allowed. That is not how this league operates. When someone is injured, there's no hiding this. It's not the NBA. This isn't golf, which I gamble on a lot, where you never know anything about the injuries, but they love everyone gambling on it. Like, everything's above board in the NFL. That's why the injury reports are very, very serious. Hell, before gambling was ever legal, whatever, 12, 13 years ago, my first year in the NFL, I used to hand out the injury report. I mean, the teams take them very, very seriously on both sides, and that was just weird. Now, big picture, it didn't look good. Let's face it. Sitting here, like, I don't have any information, but it looked like some combination of what Roethlisberger did a couple years ago and what happened to Brock Purdy last year in the NFC Championship game, when he couldn't grip the ball. And there was a slow motion play of him trying to grip the ball and throw a pass after he came out of the game, and he couldn't do it. And as just a lover of sport and as a lover of great players, like I say it all the time, I watch pro sports for the great players. Like, I show up for Lamar, for Jamar Chase, and Joe Burrow. Some of you maybe show up for the overachievers, the great stories, the seventh rounders who's hanging on. Not me. I am watching the NFL or baseball or basketball or whatever for Lewis Hamilton, Tiger Woods, and Tom Brady. That's what draws the majority of us. Now, I appreciate a lot of other stuff about football, including the Bengals, who have a lot of really good players, obviously a very good defensive coordinator, but that team goes as Joe Burrow goes. If you would have said to the majority of people that watch Pac-12 football, and while we're having a little bit of a comeback on the year before the conference gets blown up, it was a rough stretch there for a while. I'll be the first to admit. A lot of us started watching a lot of SEC football in the middle part of the 2000 teens, right? About 2014, 15, you kind of had to pay strong attention to the SEC because the football was so bad. But Jake Browning was part of a team coached by Chris Peterson at Washington that was really, really good. The problem was I never thought he was that good. And I watch a ton of college football. And obviously the hard part is there's some no-brainers. Like, you watch a Nick Bosa, Myles Garrett, certain players in college, like Jordan Addison last year, like, guys are going to play in the NFL. You watch a guy like Jake Browning and you go, I wonder if he's going to be a good coach. Like, I wonder if he'll go on to, run a bank. I wonder what he's going to do with his post-collegiate career. And then you look up several years later, and one of the stars in the NFL is walking in the locker room. They're like, Jake Browning warming up. It's like, Jake Browning is your backup quarterback? And listen, he's a Sacramento guy. I've followed his career for close to a decade now, it feels like. But it's pretty nuts. And I understand you are limited what you can do. We saw this forever with the Colts. And I think you see this right now with the Bills or even the Chiefs. They're not going to have a backup that makes substantial money that you're going to feel good about. All your chips are in the middle of the table on the one individual. And it's not that big a deal, right? Until that individual is in the locker room or on the sideline and it's clear he ain't coming back, and maybe not coming back for a while. Now, I'm going to give you a glass half full take here. The Bengal team that we saw beat the shit out of the 49ers, that looked like a team that could win the Super Bowl. Like, that version of the Bengals was like, damn, this is a squad that can really make some noise. The version we saw last week, just a couple weeks later, against the Houston Texans, obviously Higgins is out with a hamstring injury, which is pretty, I would call a major hamstring injury. It wasn't like a slight tweak. I mean, the guy's missed multiple games, and let's face it, we all know hamstring injuries when it comes to skill guys whose game is predicated on running. It's not an easy thing to come back from. I mean, he might have been out a long time. So the team that team is different than this version of the team. And the same thing with the week later when they beat the Bills. I think Higgins had, over 100 yards and like 8 or 9 catches. So you remove him and obviously Joe Burrow, like, they're screwed. They're done. They might not win another game. That's how dire it can get. But I'm going to give you the bright side of the equation here. Is like, sometimes your season really was kind of weird to begin with. Beside the couple week stretch, 49ers and Bills, you were off. And more than likely, even if you had stayed healthy, maybe it just wasn't your year. Maybe this was the year something weird happened, you got bounced in the first round. Aren't you better off in a situation of getting bounced in the first round? Just go 6-11, assuming everything big picture is going to be fine with Joe Burrow, and I'm going to assume that right now, and just restocking the cupboard with, maybe drafting ninth and having the ninth pick in every round. Like you were never going to have that opportunity ever again. I remember years ago, different scenario here, but the Atlanta Falcons traded up to get Julio Jones. And remember Thomas Dimitroff, one of his famous stories was like he called Belichick, and Belichick's like, don't do it. It's like, Thomas, good lesson learned. If you're going to make a draft decision, he's probably not the guy to call. Like, call Ozzie Newsome, call someone else, Bill Polian, anyone else who might know what they're doing in a draft. Belichick, a lot of other things to ask him for advice. Thursday, Friday, and Saturday of a National Football League draft, I wouldn't call him then. But he said, Belichick said, don't do it. He did it anyway, because he's like, with Matt Ryan, we're never going to draft high enough to get a player like this. And obviously, Julio went on to be one of the better players in franchise history, and it worked. Well, part of it was like they had to trade way up to get that because they were always going to be in the late teens or the 20s with Matt Ryan. Well, this is going to be, with the Bengals this year, let's just say they don't win another game. And all of a sudden you look at the draft day and they're drafting 7th. Like, you can just remake your team. That happened to the Lions last year. Like, Lions were already good, and then they also had the Rams pick, and they turned it into Gibbs and Laporta. It's like they kind of got to restock. And let's face it, you would much rather have the Bengals situation just because you got freaking Joe Burrow than anything the Lions have. And the Lions obviously have a lot going for them. So I don't think it's the worst case scenario, assuming there's nothing like career ender here. If he's out for the season, so be it. Lose out, restock the team. You're going to need some cheaper labor. You need some younger players. Obviously, the T. Higgins situation looms large, but maybe it's just not your year. And it sucks as a football fan not to be able to watch Joe Burrow because he's one of the guys in this league that draws you to TV. He's one of the guys in this league which kind of makes this thing the behemoth that it is in terms of the amount of us that watch. And the Ravens, like, I don't really know what to say. It turned out once he went out, they were never going to lose this game. Lamar Jackson was running around just hitting the ground like, we ain't losing this game. It was fun to watch Odell Beckham, who my girlfriend, early on in the game, it might have been their first series, might have been like the second play of the game. They threw a bomb to Beckham. And actually, it looked like he had a step. Lamar overthrew him, and Al goes like, something, throw deep to Beckham. And she goes, I didn't know Beckham had a son. And I looked at her, I'm like, Beckham has a son? David Beckham? No, this is Odell Beckham Jr., no relation to David Beckham. But he looks good, fun player. They're actually a fun team. And I think they're going to look back on that game that they blew against Cleveland and kick themselves, because that ultimately might be their undoing for the number 1 seed. But before I hopped on, I wrote their remaining schedule. They're obviously 8-3. They have a long break now because the mini bye. They play the Chargers next week. They win that, they're 9-3. They're in pretty good shape, because then they play the Rams, 10-3. Then they play the Jags, who I don't think are as bad as they showed last week, but I saw some quotes from Doug about Trevor's knee not being right. So I think they would have a chance. They'll probably be favored in that game, 11-3. And then they got a really tough stretch at 49ers, Dolphins, Steelers. But I think you're looking at a 12, probably best case scenario, 13-win team. And a team now, I think a lot like the Bengals the last couple of years, Joe Burrow proved, like, I'm a championship level player, right? Like, I know he hasn't won a championship, but you watch Joe Burrow, you're like, that guy is going to be a champion if he's on a good team and he stays healthy, because he's that good, right? You watch James Harden, you're like, yeah, you're never winning a championship. You watch Russell Westbrook, you're like, no fucking chance. None. Like, you guys are never winning a championship. You watch Joe Burrow, even Josh Allen, I would put Lamar in that category. It's like, to me, they're good enough to win championships. You just got to do it. And I think Josh Allen, a lot like Lamar Jackson, it's like, you got to make some hay in these big games. So clearly this team's really good. Defensively, they're good. Their passing game is so much better. We'll see what happens with Mark Andrews and what do they call it? The hip tackle. I know everyone freaks out on the internet streets. It doesn't bother me as much. It's football. You tackle them. No one's ever trying to hurt anyone with tackling. Obviously, it looks like they're going to ban that tackle. I'm not as up in arms about everyone else. I truly believe. Now, I understand the injury risk that comes along with it, but I think it's pretty clear in 2023, no defender is trying to injure anybody. They're just trying to do the best to get a guy on the ground, which I don't know if anyone played peewee football, high school football, let alone college or the pros. Tackling's hard. Like it's difficult to get really good players to the ground. So I hope Mark Andrews is fine. It looked really bad. It was one of those where like Lamar went right over to him. Anytime, listen, you have any player, let alone a star impact player, where your teammates and the opposing team goes over and they look at the sideline and start screaming and pointing. I was like, God, did he dislocate his knee? Did he dislocate his hip? You know, I know he was out for the game, but he was able to walk off. Let's keep our fingers crossed that he's going to be okay. I think now, I mean, if you had to handicap, I was thinking about this, mid-game, Burrow out, Deshaun out, Rodgers out. I mean, Herbert might miss the playoffs. Like, the Steelers don't have a quarterback. Tua's the Dolphins quarterback. That's no shade. Tua's had a good year. Like, this is the Chiefs' passing game is questionable. The defense is good, and they're built for the playoffs. And if they have home field, like, this is a moment for Lamar. I mean, there's a decent chance that the AFC Championship, whether you're hosting or you got to go there, is you taking on Mahomes. And Harbaugh, you taking on Andy. Be a big moment for the franchise. The franchise is big time, right? I mean, toward the end of the game, they show Ozzie Newsome, who once upon a time the owner said is going to be the highest paid retired GM in NFL history. So obviously Ozzie still plays a role there. He's still around. Like, the Ravens are a high level fucking franchise. And if I had to bet right now, it feels like some of these injuries with the way things are shaping up, I would go Ravens Chiefs right now as the clear two-headed monster in the AFC.
Can you believe we're this deep into the NFL season? We got to make every second count. With DraftKings Sportsbook, you can make the most out of every game. Bet on your favorite teams for a shot at winning big bucks. New customers can score $150 instantly in bonus bets for betting $5 on any matchup. So right now, get in on the action with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Download the app now and use the code JOHN. New customers can score $150 instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 on the NFL. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code JOHN. The crown is yours.
Many of you, if you're listening to this, probably didn't see because not everybody has Twitter. And I think one big picture thing when it comes to the sports media, and I think just the media in general, but let's just start with the sports media. I don't think there's ever been a bigger disconnect with what they get worked up about than what us, the fans, and the people at home consuming the games think about. And ultimately, these games exist just like anyone in the media, whether you're a writer, whether you are a TV host, whether you have a podcast or whatever, because of fans. They are the important people here. Like, why does Amazon dominate? Because they are consumer friendly and they have a lot of consumers. Without the consumer, there is no Amazon. Apple doesn't have all the money without all of us buying all the products. The media doesn't exist when it comes to sports if we are not consuming them. We dictate it. And I think sometimes their feelings and emotions get ahead of themselves. And listen, calling an NFL game, I can't, it's very, very difficult. I tried to call a game one time in college, a baseball game, and I was like, this is not for me. So I have a ton of respect for that. I do think a lot of the writing community, the guys that write and girls that write, they can be bitter, I think, sometimes, because there is a lot more money in the audio place and obviously on television. And there's a bitterness that I think if you follow a lot of these people on Twitter that they can't even hide. And Carissa Thompson, who has been part of the NFL world for a long, long time, who is, I think, very, very good at her job, was on with Pardon My Take, the biggest podcast in America when it comes to sports, and said that a couple times during her career, coming out of halftime, the coach didn't come out, she could not grab him, and she essentially made up a report. Coach Harbaugh said the game plan, they're going to stick with the run game and continue to be physical on defense. Back to you, Troy. I got news for you. None of us that watch football, and the whole reason any of this exists, why Amazon paid all this fucking money for the National Football League, is because of us sitting on the couch streaming that game. And listen, I'm not trying to throw shade at sideline reporters. I'm sure it's a hard gig. I've never done it. But it doesn't matter. If they went away tomorrow, none of us would notice. None of us would notice. In basketball, they are so pointless. I personally think you gain little. Now, sometimes with an injury, for sure. If I would even be a little worked up if she had just said she had made up injuries, but she literally said that she made up a report talking about, like, we're going to run the ball and be physical. The reports in that situation are always the same. Rinse, wash, repeat. They literally never change. And I think sometimes in the sphere of people that cover sports, there is like this inflated self-importance. Like, ultimately, this is fun. It's obviously a profession, but it's not that big a deal. And I think there can be an inflated, and this is no different than coaches and players, anybody. I mean, it's any walk of life. But some of this, The Athletic reached out to Amazon and they declined to comment. Reached out to Amazon about Carissa Thompson's comments on the podcast. That's insanity. You reach out to Amazon, maybe if one of their people got arrested for like domestic violence and were on air, or if they were interested in purchasing, I don't know, the NBA, to reach out, that to me is the perfect example of the gap between what interested the media and what ultimately the consumer wants. And the other thing I find funny, and I saw this a lot from, the media brethren on social media, is like, this is what leads to the distrust from the fan in the media. It's like, no, dog, we lost trust in you guys a long, long time ago. If you think anyone is up in arms and losing trust over some useless comment after halftime from Pete Carroll or Sean McVay, you are living in la la land. Okay, let's go around the NFL. I saw a headline today. Obviously, Texas A&M paid Jimbo Fisher $700 million to leave, and they need a new coach. Well, if you're willing, in all seriousness, they paid him $76 million. I actually saw the breakdown. It's like, I think they paid him $19 million. Next year, it's like $6 million. And then for like 6 straight years, it's $7 million. Listen, I love to work. I've been working a lot my entire life since I left college. Now, granted, I've only worked in one industry. It's the only thing I've ever done is work in some form of football. So I enjoy what I do. But if you paid me a substantial amount of money not to work, and listen, I say it all the time, like, money, I don't get that much juice. Now, granted, I've never been paid $7 million a year for 8 straight years not to work. That's got to be a pretty powerful feeling. I mean, it really does. Would leave you a lot of options to do a lot of different things. If you're semi-curious in life, you could just go down a lot of rabbit holes, figure it like with your body and do them. It'd probably be quite the experience, at least for a couple years till you got bored. But rumors were Dan Campbell played at Texas A&M. And here's the thing. We've seen a lot of times in the NFL, guys could not hack it. They just did not belong. Most recently, Urban Meyer had no business being in the NFL. But we've seen other guys like have a moment, but it's like, you're not an NFL coach. Chip Kelly, like, get out of here. Nick Saban, come on, go. And they go to the college, and Chip, not necessarily, but Nick Saban, Bobby Petrino, these guys are much more suited for college football. If you win in the NFL, if you're having success, even if you're on, quote unquote, the shittiest franchise, right? The best franchises aren't even necessarily the biggest brands. Just they kind of are because you're more famous. It's whoever's paying you the most. Like when Bill Belichick got to the New England Patriots, they weren't some enormous brand in the NFL. He helped create them with Tom Brady to now viewed as one of the big, quote unquote, brands in the NFL, right? If you're the coach of the Cowboys, if you're the coach of the Steelers, remember last year, or was it 2 years ago, when Mike Tomlin was asked about USC? Would he be interested in going to USC? Why? Because he's like cool and would recruit well. And he was offended. I mean, he was offended. I don't blame him. If the Pittsburgh Steelers want you to be their head coach, there is no college job that would even be strong enough for you to pick up the fucking phone. Now, the Lions historically are one of those jobs that, like, do you really want to coach the Lions? But if I told you the Lions are good and they're playing the Bears this week, though I kind of like the Bears +8, Lions look like they're going to be 8-2. And more than likely, they're headed toward 12 and 13 wins. But this is clearly not just some one-off situation. The rest of their teams in their division don't have quarterbacks. Their team is really, really young. A lot of guys on rookie contracts. And Dan is like kind of fits the city. So even if Texas A&M was willing to pay him $30 million, and the Lions would be like, Dan, we'll give you like a 5-6 year contract, but we won't match the money. It ain't even about the money. When it comes to recruiting, the transfer portal, here's the thing. Do you know if you want to transfer in the NFL, I don't have to trade you, right? You're like, I want a trade. You can just say, no. Remember the Packers, Aaron Rodgers, a couple years ago, like, trade me. And they're like, see you at training camp, Aaron. That was the best player in the NFL. And they're like, camp starts July 27th. In college, if I want to trade and I hit that transfer portal, I literally just leave. When it comes to boosters, in the National Football League, you answer to one individual. It's the owner. In college, you answer to the 8 boosters, the athletic director, the provost, the president, and 7 other morons. It is not even close. So I understand why Texas A&M thinks their money can buy them anything. But I also appreciate Dan Campbell. Florio wrote like he already just reached like his intermediate, like, yeah, we're not interested. Like he didn't even use them to get an extension, which I'm sure he's going to get at the end of the season. But I think it's a good example of the difference of the NFL and college, because historically the Lions, if it was college football, like who would they be? I mean, pick a team that is just Boston College. I don't even know. I mean, who's like the shittiest? Rutgers? And even Rutgers have had some moments in my life with Greg Schiano. So I would say the Lions, if it was a college football program, would clearly of the Power 5 be one of the worst. Yet Dan Campbell doesn't even contemplate leaving, which is the right move because you never leave the NFL. Okay, a couple other things around the NFL. Big week for Pittsburgh. And we talked about them earlier this week. They're getting DTR. You can't listen. They have had one of the crazier statistical seasons in terms of a team being outscored, being outgained, and just looking from the eye test, abysmal on offense. Yet they win this game, they'd be 7-3. Now, it's on the road, divisional opponent, things get weird, but you're playing Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who's a really good athlete and who in the preseason looked like, I don't know, he was the next coming of like Lamar Jackson meets Josh Allen. But as we all learn, the preseason does not translate like that. So I'm fascinated to watch this game. I actually feel bad for Browns fans, not even because I don't even like Deshaun Watson, but I like the story of the franchise. I appreciate the fan base at home. This is just, I like this division. One thing I thought about tonight watching the Ravens play the Bengals, like there are a lot of guys in the NFL who are probably solid players who I don't know if they could play consistently in that division. It's really cold. It's really physical. I mean, it just feels like the tough guy division. And you put 2 of those teams, now that they're all pretty good, on at the same, playing against each other in any, you take any 4 and you match them up, you'll get my eyes because there's a physicality to those games. Even the night early on before Burrow went out and the Bengals had hope, there's just an edge. There's an edge to their crowd. It's always fucking freezing for those of us on the West Coast. I mean, it's cold today in Arizona. It's like 78 degrees. You look up, it's just like they're wearing beanies. You can see their breath. There's just a violence, a physicality mixed in with the cold and the weather to that division that I've always appreciated as someone who hates the cold. I used to ski a lot. It's like, I'm not even interested in skiing. I don't want snow in my socks anymore. I'll just sit in the bar and watch television. Come get me after. But I'm fascinated by that game. Another game I'm pretty interested in is Miami and the Raiders. Now, we've talked a lot this week, in the last couple of weeks, about Antonio Pierce. I actually think this could be a tough spot for him because the more and more I thought about it, I was like, I think I'm going to go to the DraftKings Sportsbook and place a pretty big wager on Oregon State this week. And I was like, should I also, the Raiders getting a lot of points? And then I was like, I'm going to take a rookie quarterback on the road against Vic Fangio. Like, that seems pretty crazy. Off a bye? Like, I probably need to pump the brakes there. Like, this is a spot, and listen, as someone, and you Miami fans get on my ass because I don't put you on a tier. Now, granted, this year, how could I? I've seen you play real good teams and get worked. It's kind of open it up for you, right? The Bills kicked your ass. That Bills team is long gone. Long gone. Those defensive players are gone. This version of Josh Allen, even though statistically, I saw someone say everyone's acting like he's some scrub, he is statistically easily, even with the game the other night, a top 3 quarterback in the NFL. He's had a better season than Lamar Jackson. His moments, 2 of them, have just come on Monday Night Football, but the totality of his year actually is not very bad. I think we can do that sometimes. It's always been a Ryan Russillo thing and it's so true. In other sports, like you play Sunday Night Baseball or TNT doubleheader on Thursday in basketball, it doesn't really matter. You play so many games. In football, if you play Monday Night Football, you play Sunday Night Football, and you're a primetime, name, and you shit the bed, it's like, God, is this guy losing it? Is this guy slipping? He's like, wait, he leads the league in touchdowns. It's like one bad game because you might throw 5 touchdowns, but if you're playing in the morning slate on Sunday afternoon, people change that channel after the second quarter when you're up by 25 points. I've done that to the Bills a couple times this year. Did it twice early in the season when they played the Raiders and when they played the Dolphins. I'm like, this game was over before half. But you watch them on Monday night, you're like, God, Josh Allen, do they need to have an intervention with the guy? And he's like, actually, I think he's okay. Clearly not for their standards, but overall, I think we've overreacted a little bit there. But this is a good spot for Miami, right? Because you're coming in, you're getting a rookie quarterback, an interim head coach. If you're a real deal team, like, you kill these fucking guys. You destroy them. You win this game by 25 points. I'll definitely have my eyes there. I saw that McCaffrey has a chance. He's like 4 receptions away from passing Roger Craig as the most receptions through 7 years at running back. It really is amazing when, trades can do a couple things for players, right? For Von Miller, it led to a Super Bowl and an enormous payday. And honestly, that payday was all because of that 3 or 4 game playoff stretch. It really was week would have been 18 at the time against the 49ers. And then all the playoff games where he had a sack in every playoff game and won a Super Bowl. And he got $55 million from the Bills. Listen, I love Von Miller, but an older player, even at the time before he had torn his ACL, that contract was insanity. That was nuts. But the trade did it. It really revitalized his name. Now, he was older, right? He was over 30. McCaffrey was like 26 years old and rotting away on not the biggest NFL brand, and they're terrible. So, like, no one's paying attention. And he comes to the 49ers, and he's immediately a superstar again. Like, an absolute, like, rock star in the NFL. And that's what happens when you play for good teams, especially when they're big brands. And today I saw McCaffrey said that Trent Williams, the best player he's ever seen. They asked Trent Williams about it, and he said, that's right back out Christian McCaffrey. And I think he was being nice, but I think what he's saying is, like, this guy's one of the best players in the NFL. And let's be real. I know he had some really good years early on in his career, but he had kind of been out of sight, out of mind, injury prone, whatever. The 49ers trade, changed the course of this guy's career. He's still got a long ways to go, and listen, the running back position, you get injured, but given the coach, given the way this team plays, given how they use him, if he could stay healthy now for several 3-4 years, you'd be talking about a Hall of Fame level player. And that was never going to happen in Carolina. I know he got to make a lot of money there. He got to have those couple years of doing the cool stats, but it was all kind of hollow. And now he gets to be part of a team that's winning big, and he's, one of the engines behind it. So it's kind of cool to see.
I bet a lot of people listening or watching have been in an accident. I bet a lot of people have been into an intense car accident. And let's face it, not knowing who to call for help is hard. Hiring Morgan & Morgan is easy. Because Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm with over 100 offices nationwide with more than 800 lawyers. They've recovered over $15 billion for over 300,000 clients. Morgan & Morgan has a proven track record of fighting to get you full and fair compensation. They've been fighting for the people for over 35 years. Submitting an injury claim with Morgan & Morgan is so easy. That's the key. Not having representation is hard. Fighting with Morgan & Morgan is easy. If you've ever been injured, you can check out Morgan & Morgan. Their fee is free unless they win. For more information, go to forthepeople.com/John or dial pound law, pound 529 from your cell phone. That's forthepeople.com/JOHN or pound law, pound 529 from your cell phone. This is a paid advertisement.
Okay, let's do the Guinness bold take of the week. Now, I've taken some big swings this year, and I've missed on a decent amount of them. Then I started getting close. Started saying, this is the week a guy gets fired. Then all of a sudden, Frank Reich, demotes himself. And I'm like, really close. And then I said, something with Caleb Williams, and it almost happened. And then last week, I said the Houston Texans would go into Cincinnati, they would win the game, and C.J. Stroud would throw his hat in the ring as an MVP candidate. And then it happened. Well, this week, I'm going to go against the Houston Texans because I think everyone and their mother, and rightfully so based on what has happened so far this year, is going to go the Houston Texans. Could they take on the Ravens? Could this team with C.J. Stroud handle the Chiefs? And this happens every year. A team, especially a younger team, newer head coach, younger quarterback, catches a little fire. Everyone bets on him. I love the Arizona Cardinals. And I love DeMeco Ryans and I love C.J. Stroud. And I think over the course of the next couple of years, they are going to be a serious factor if this quarterback can play at this level. Because they are going to be dramatically better the next couple of years as they get more draft picks. They still have the Browns draft pick, which could turn out to be pretty good because they might just start losing with Dorian Thompson-Robinson. This team, to me, is going to be 2024, 2025. Watch out. I do think this year, though, they're going to tease us a little bit. As we've seen, a couple weeks ago, they lost to the Carolina Panthers. I think the Arizona Cardinals this week, who have been a bizarre team, but now that Kyler's back, what if they're actually kind of good now? Just because you're not used to playing. There aren't that many guys like him. Unless you're playing Lamar Jackson, how do you get used to? There were a couple scramble runs in that game. I said this last week. I don't know if he's 100%, but he damn sure is closer to 100% than he is like 75. And his speed at 85, 90% is faster than the majority of guys in the NFL. It's why, listen, we can nitpick him. Dude loves a good Call of Duty, playing with his buddies with an ear set in. Don't totally blame him. The graphics in these games now are pretty incredible, especially if you can play online. But when you're making a lot of money to play quarterback, you need you in the playbook. And I understand he's driven some people nuts. Might not have been the most mature guy, but as a physical talent, there's a reason a guy 5'9" was a no-brainer number one overall talent. Like Bryce Young, you watch him, you go, God, this is going to have to go really well. You can put Kyler on a shitty team, run around, you're like, damn, this guy's enormous arm, elite speed, built like a little tank, even though he's short. I kind of think the Arizona Cardinals go in there. And that's not the craziest take. They're only a 4-point. I think it actually went up 4.5, 5 points. I think the casuals, and I'm technically a casual when I bet. And most times I bet casually in terms of like bet with the people, like bet on the Texans. I'm going against the grain. I like the Cardinals, and I think Kyler Murray goes in there and looks freaking awesome. I think Kyler, here's the other take I will add to this. I think I'd say 85%, assuming they win some games and are well out of the top couple picks of Caleb and Drake May. I think they just roll back with Kyler Murray and they use their picks on other players and just for the next couple of years try to build around that player. Because I think you're going to see over the next couple of weeks, and listen, he's got his flaws and he's got to prove that he can stay healthy. But there's no lock that like Caleb Williams is going to be dramatically better than Kyler. I think we always do this with college prospects. I'm guilty too. Take this guy. Marvin Harrison's the next Jerry Rice. Then all of a sudden, Marvin Harrison, good player, is never a top 7 wide receiver. He might be, might not be. I was told when Jerry Jeudy came in the league, he was going to be fucking, the next Marvin Harrison, the dad. I watched Jerry Jeudy, decent player, but he's not even like a top 25 wide receiver in the NFL. It's hard. For every prospect that you think can't miss, most of them miss or even never live up to what you think. Whenever we comp you, like think of who Caleb, and listen, I'm not trying to crap on Caleb Williams' ability, but his comp is Patrick Mahomes. Before Patrick Mahomes came around, we'd literally never seen that. Now that you see it happen with so many players in so many sports. After Draymond early on in his career came out and he was like the Swiss Army knife, could do everything. Every single guy for like 5 years in the NBA draft who was like kind of a hybrid, didn't have a position, but could do a lot of things. Like this guy's like Draymond Green. None of them were remotely close to Draymond Green. And obviously it's a higher level when you're talking elite quarterbacks, but I think we just do this sometimes. And I'm not saying he won't be a really good player. He has a lot of talent, but so does Kyler. And I'd keep an eye on Kyler doing some kind of things that are going to be eye-opening this last month and a half of the season. And I think this leads to Kyler Murray staying as the Arizona Cardinals, which I would not have bet on when the season started. But I think you just kind of paying attention. You see where this is going. Like Kyler Murray is going to be the Cardinals quarterback in 2024. That's my bold take. Brought to you by Guinness. Gather your friends, raise your glasses, and toast to a win. Guinness Draft Stout, imported by Diageo Beer Company, USA, New York, New York. Please drink responsibly.